So through the course of this class, I've been thinking a lot about how we can get social justice into our science curriculum and how we can incorporate the two together. I decided to do a topic here that I chose, and it's obviously geology related. And the reason I chose this one is because I thought it would tie in well with social justice. It talks about Earth changes due to weathering, and how rocks change shape, size, and form due to the ice movement, things such as pollution and even catastrophic events. So I wanted to do this topic because I saw it as tying into social justice in two ways. First of all, I thought that at the core of every lesson, if we're going to tie in social justice, we should start with our students really knowing that they are being scientists when they perform these different lessons. And I thought about, to do this in my lesson, I decided that when I would start out, I would show pictures of different types of either volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, maybe even some like weathering that you would see, like a tree that has been weathered. Different things that they could kind of look at and think about. Maybe even like landslides or different results from freezing and thawing. And I was going to show the students the pictures first and then have them kind of hypothesize about what they think is taking place in the picture. And to kind of notice, what do they notice about it? What do they think strange or different? And then also to kind of start to brainstorm and think about what they think might have caused these changes. So I think that in order to empower the students, they have to be the ones to really do some really strong critical thinking and wondering about the lesson. So I want to start them out with them looking at these pictures and trying to make sense of them. Then once and all these things they're going to kind of record in their journal. This is like their initial thoughts. Like, why do you think this happens? What does any of this remind you of? And how do you put this together with something else you've seen before or what you know? So they're going to start there. The next part is when they're actually going to start to look for more pictures similar to the ones that they found. So if they're finding, for example, earthquakes or volcanoes, they're going to find more pictures and then include like things like dates, the size of the impact, time of year, where it's taking place, and start getting some information. They are going to start kind of researching, not the causes necessarily, but putting together just what are some patterns I see about this phenomenon and where do they happen, the different things. And this is also where math ties in, because they can graph, where do these things occur the most, or what time of year, and just those different kind of elements. They'll start piecing those together and kind of graphing what they find. The next section is where they start to kind of look deeper and to really study it out. So at this point, they're going to start researching. And at this point, so in the beginning, each student chooses the photo that intrigues them the most, that they want to know more about. So by this next part, they're going to start with a group, and that group will get together and they will start pulling together their ideas as a group first. So all along the way, they're going to be recording in their journal how that working with the group either confirmed what they thought, changed their ideas, challenged their ideas, and really thinking through how collaboration sort of adds another depth to their thinking. And once they become a group, that's when they're going to hardcore start looking into what evidence is there that supports or maybe even goes against the theory that they've created as to what's occurring, why it's occurring. And through that process, they're going to be thinking critically and learning how to evaluate sources. Is this a good source of information? How do you know? That kind of just really getting to know, is this a source I can trust, or should I, try something else? And then even once they find trusted, validated sources of science, I still am further having them to really think about it and think about how that new information, did it change your mind? Do you still think that, are there parts of the theory that you accept, parts that you still reject, and why? And kind of giving students that chance to really think, well, this is accepted science theory, but are there still questions? And then them kind of giving that opportunity to kind of dive in and think, what else, what kind of more information do we need to know in order to really back these theories? Is there some loopholes? Is there something missing? Or is there some bias? And I really want this to be a lot about geology and understanding, but I also want this to be a lot about them just really diving into information and learning how to think deeply and how to even challenge what's already been accepted. And I think that through this, they're going to get that opportunity to feel empowered, because I'm giving them a chance that they can share what they learned as a group, but then they can also share what at the end, what theories did you come up with, and how does that relate to what science, those in this field of science agree on, and how those things interconnect. And I think that this lesson excites me because this is something I feel like I would really try out in my classroom. Because I think when you start from that perspective of the phenomenon first, when they have that experience first, I think it'll be a really interesting experience to kind of watch the kids go through and see what they come up with, see what they know, see how they're putting things together. I was going to also wanted to talk about the last part where it talks about the questions, and let me choose one here that I felt like was the one that I really wanted to explain. Okay. So this part here says, describe how this standard, so this standard about weathering, could be connected to student experiences, needs, aspirations, challenges, questions, and wondering. I put that this lesson can be related to experiences like friction, so students know that when they walk around, their shoes and use their shoe soles wear out. So I thought about things like that. That would be a good example. Things in the neighborhood, they become eroded, they break down if they're not taken care of, things rust, decay, dissolve. And they're continually seeing that in their everyday environment. So I thought that it would be good that students could maybe, even when I mentioned in the part where it says, what does this remind you of? So students can think about what do they know and how is it similar to what they're seeing in these different natural phenomenons. So it would be easier to never question and just accept things, but I think this lesson is all about challenging that idea and actually allowing students to kind of become experts in some way. So the lesson will provide depth to student learning, because while not all students are studying each and every phenomenon mentioned in the standard, they're all digging very deep. They're looking further into why these things occur. They're looking at patterns, analyzing data just as a scientist. They are collaborating and jigsawing with their peers, which also increases their learning, as their peers become teachers themselves as they present their findings about their group's phenomenon. All of this works together to empower students, allowing them to collaborate, question, and construct their own knowledge. This leads back to looking at whose facts and whose knowledge count and why. So I think as the teacher in this lesson, like, your job would be to help the students with some meaningful questions. And I think that some of the questions that I've created would help this lesson along. So it's a lot of what's going on in the picture, what do you notice, what is strange, what has happened, what caused it, what does it remind you of, who's being affected. So that's another. So I think that the groundwork for the social justice is that the students are empowered themselves to be scientists, to be actually practicing and doing what a scientist would do. But I think the second part of the social justice that ties into the lesson is thinking about who is affected by these natural phenomena that occur, and what does that mean for them, and what changes can we make that might make it better. And this goes into things about being socially responsible. This can go into things about pollution, about, your carbon footprint. All of those things can show students that their individual choices have a world and global effect, that these things affect our world and our environment. So I think that that kind of ties up nicely the lesson into a broader spectrum of how is this affecting us globally. And that was a big part of what we learned about the new learning, the next generation science standards, and how those apply. So I think that all those things tied together to make this a really interesting lesson that I'm excited to try.